right, I guess we can probably get started. So, oh, very good. Well, everybody, thank you very much for joining us. So on behalf of the Center for Urban Language Teaching and Research here at Georgia State University, I'd like to welcome you to the 6th Annual World Languages Week. CULTR, as we are known, is one of 16 federally funded Title VI language resource centers in the United States. We have been able to forge a very unique identity around serving the needs of all students and the communities they represent, and help them help promote language learning opportunities as part of a 21st century global education. We have certain core values that are access, advocacy, outreach, and research, and for which we have gained a national reputation for very innovative approaches to promoting access to language education for all students, and regardless of their socioeconomic and ethnic background. So this is very, very important. We're very proud of that. I'm Dr. Tim Jansa. I'm the Chief Administrator at the Department of World Languages and Cultures, and I'm also CULTR's Budget Manager. So I'd like to thank you for being here with us today for our alumni panel, and I'm going to be moderating this panel. Before I introduce the panelists, I'd like to just address a couple of housekeeping and technical points. So all attendees will remain muted throughout the entire session. If for some reason your connection is interrupted during the panel discussion, simply rejoin with the same link that you used to access the session previously. Once the event has reached its capacities, attendees may tune in via live stream on YouTube, which we're doing. Our panel discussion is going to be about 35-40 minutes, and will be followed by a Q&A with you, which is you, the attendees. Students may submit some questions throughout the course of the discussion at any time, and after also in the Q&A box. So when you look at the bottom, there's a Q&A box. You just click on the icon there on the bottom of your screen. If you'd like to, if there are any kind of questions you'd like to see, if anybody else asks a question you'd like to see, just click on the thumbs up icon, and that actually will float that question to the top. So we would like to address the most relevant questions that are to you. For now, I'd like to draw your attention back to the event website. There you find the instructions also to download the Goose Chase app. So sign up today for a virtual scavenger hunt for Goose Chase, and prizes will actually be awarded to the top scoring schools. So make sure you participate in that. So for now, that's it. So I'd like to introduce our panelists, our three wonderful panelists. The first one is Jana Ferguson. She's the Director of Customer Enablement at Sugar CRM. Then we have Nive Ganeshan. She's a Senior PMO Analyst at UPS Supply Chain Solutions. And then we have Mary Lyles, who is a Global Sourcing Expert. And all three are alumni, I should say, of Georgia State University. All right, so I would like to actually just turn this over for now, and let's just start maybe with some introductions. Instead of my reading your bio, maybe you can introduce yourself very briefly and a little bit of your background, and then also address some of the things that you've learned about how languages and intercultural education that you received as part of your education, and then outside your formal education, have actually helped you in your career search. So Jana, do you want to start?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. So thanks everybody for coming. We're really excited to talk to everyone today. So as Tim said, I'm Jana Ferguson. I currently work for a company called Sugar CRM. And what we do is we create software for companies that they use to help keep track of all of their leads and contacts, the accounts that they work with, their own customers, and help them provide excellent customer experiences for their own customers. And before I started doing that, I actually was a Spanish teacher. So I studied Spanish really starting in middle school. So a lot like you guys, I started then and took it all through high school and college as well. I studied abroad in Spain. Right after high school, I went to Georgia Southern, and then also went back to school at Georgia State and did my Spanish degree there. Learning languages and studying different types of intercultural communication has been a huge assistance to me in all different parts of my career. So obviously, while I was teaching, clearly I needed to have some language skills there to teach to all of my students, but then also transitioning out of education and into the business world, it really allowed me to connect with different types of people and be able to kind of talk about my experiences and what I can bring to their company in a different way that I probably wouldn't have been able to do otherwise. So yeah, that's me.
Excellent, thank you. Mary, would you like to continue?
Yeah, so thanks again for having me today. And my name is Mary Lyles. I'm proud to be here, proud Panther. I have both my bachelor's and my master's degrees from Georgia State. So I am a diehard bleed blue Panther alumni to the core. So I also started studying Spanish in middle school. And continued throughout high school, where I was able to go to the University of Salamanca for a week in high school, which was a wonderful experience. And then graduating high school in 2009, it was the height of the recession. I really wanted to be a Georgia Bulldog, but didn't get in because everybody was staying in state that year. And went to Georgia State, fell in love with the diversity of the university. There was a 5-year program that was offered at the time where you could pick a foreign language and then roll into your master's degree immediately after. So I chose Spanish, used multiple resources that I'm sure we'll get into later in this chat at Georgia State, and then studied abroad and then entered into the master's program. I've been able to use my language skills in just about every job that I've had, and we'll be glad to share more in a little bit.
Excellent, thank you, Mary. Nive, what about you?
Hi, everyone. I'm Nive Ganeshan. I currently work for UPS Supply Chain Solutions as a senior PMO analyst. That's the Program Management Office. So essentially what my team does is we oversee programs and projects for our little business area, which is global logistics. I was a double major at Georgia State. I studied French literature and history. And I also come from a family of linguists, so languages have been a big part of my life. I grew up in India, my mother tongue is Tamil, but when I went to school, I had to also learn Hindi and Telugu. And I've also lived in Germany and France. I taught English in France. So throughout my life, languages have just played a major role in terms of living places, interacting with different people, and just some of the skills I picked up as a French major apply to my job right now. So I'm excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Excellent, thank you. Nive, this was actually a great segue. So one of the things that I think all of you mentioned was certain skills that you acquired as part of your language learning and exposure to other cultures. Maybe we can talk about this for a couple of minutes and just kind of tell our attendees a little bit about what specifically you have learned and how that has helped you in your career and your life, and just made things better for you, I hope, in a way. Nive, do you want to get started, and then feel free to have a free discussion?
Sure. I mean, studying French in college obviously gave me the ability to speak French, but along with it came just interpersonal skills, intercultural communication skills. I think it's made me a more empathetic person, especially in the world today. I think it's made me more tolerant and understanding of people from different backgrounds. And that plays into also the work area. I work for a company that has a global reach, so we have coworkers in Asia or in Europe, and, business is done in a different way in different places. And it's just, I think those skills have really just helped to understand where people are coming from, why you may not see eye to eye in certain situations. And, it's not that it's just different or weird, but it's just a different way of doing things.
Yeah, to add to that, I think what has been more shocking in stepping into the real world after college, and coming across a diverse range of people from all over the world, you are developing these soft skills that you don't even realize are being developed along the way. It's me speaking Spanish as a second language to someone who is thrilled that I can speak to them. And then on the flip side, I was working for Pier 1 Imports, and they filed for bankruptcy and have now liquidated the company. So I was laid off June 1st. So a lot of my business was 100% in Asia. So I was going over there and working with people who were speaking English as a second and third language. And like Nivi was saying, you become more empathetic, you become more patient. You might have to try to explain something different ways 2 or 3 and 4 times. And I think, you know, keeping your cool in those situations and really working with them and understanding where they're coming from is special. Not everybody has that skill. One of my, you know, I would travel with my buying team, and one of my buyers, she would shut down. Like I had to take over. Like she would get agitated and irritated. And then they didn't like to work with her because she wasn't nice when she felt like she couldn't communicate the way that she wanted to. It had to be her way, and didn't have that flexibility that was involved.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with all of that. Like what I do and what my team does is all directly customer facing. And so a lot of what we do is we explain really difficult technical, almost engineering concepts a lot of times to like your average layman person who is non-technical. And so we almost have to have this like interpreter-like skill set to be able to take something that's really complex and re-explain it to people in a way that they understand. And I lean on skills that I learned learning languages all the time to do that. And so even though I'm speaking English, it's the same skill set that you learn when you're learning a language. Like if you guys have, the fancy word is circumlocution, but like when you can't remember a word in the language that you're learning, you kind of talk around it and you say it in a way that, you know, gets your message across, but maybe isn't the exact right word that you were looking for. And so, you know, we do that a lot of times with customers. I can't put an engineer on the phone with a customer. They're not going to be able to communicate with each other. So we have to act as that middleman and kind of be able to interpret that as well. So.
It's really interesting, Jan, that you mentioned that you have to be able to communicate things in a way that other people will understand. But you first have to recognize, of course, that other people see the world differently, right? Mm-hmm. And Mary, it seems like the buyer you mentioned was actually really disadvantaged by not having these skills, right?
Yeah, she definitely was. And it kind of, you know, in the moment when you're talking business or trying to figure something out, whatever it was, because there were multiple occasions this happened. You know, relationships are so important. And when you can't communicate, then you can't have a relationship. And with, you know, everybody, no matter, you know, who they are, and, you know, maybe they're speaking, you know, English with an accent, but don't sit there and judge them. You don't even know a word. I always try, when I travel, I try to learn words of the language where I'm at. And she wasn't even putting in any effort. And it's, you know, it changes people's perspectives. And, you know, it takes energy to be the person or to put in that effort, but it's so rewarding at the end of the day to see people's faces light up and to get that deal done or to get that purchase order written. So yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's a great way to gain someone's trust, whether it's on a personal level or even in the business world, whether you're dealing with customers from different parts of the world. And, you know, obviously studying a foreign language, I'm sure none of our language skills were perfect, but even just trying to show that you are willing to try and putting yourself out there, I think that really helps build trust between people.
Well, and trust seems to be one of those major issues these days, right? I mean, not just in the business world, but I mean, without you know, addressing politics, but I think, you know, we could definitely use a little more trust. But one of the things that I've noticed as well is that, you know, with globalization, we're so much more interconnected now, right? I mean, we can just, my friends or my older friends are sometimes surprised when I just take my phone and I get on WhatsApp and have a video chat with my parents in Germany. And even 20 years ago, this was something that was just, 10 years even, was unthinkable. So we're so much more connected. And we also can't assume that the English language is the language for the world, you know, with that we've always assumed. So it's always great to make the effort. I think this is a huge advantage that we have, by just recognizing that. So since we're the alumni panel, I think some of the questions that have always come up in the past are related to, so what am I going to do with these language skills afterward? How will this help me, whether it's a career search or just broadening my horizons? How is this going to make my life better down the road? And so one of the questions I wanted to ask you is, in your career search, what kind of resources have you used or are you using that may or may not be language related, but just some skills that you have learned are really helpful in terms of opening career opportunities? Jana, would you like to start?
Yeah, I think one of the things, and it is more of like a soft skill that you can't always like put your finger on. But I think one of the things that I learned when I was especially early on learning a language, that's really important is to just put yourself out there and don't be afraid to, speak to someone or try and communicate something in the language that you're learning. And that really carried over into my job search, because something someone told me, is actually a professor at Georgia State, Dr. Swanson. I very distinctly remember him saying, the worst thing you can hear is no. And then it's just, you just move on. So, getting over that fear of kind of putting yourself out there and not being afraid to message someone that you see on LinkedIn that's a hiring manager for a position, or maybe even someone that you are remotely connected to. Maybe they know a friend of a friend of a friend kind of thing. And not being afraid to just reach out to someone and ask if they're willing to help you, because most of the time people are. Most people love helping other people with whatever it may be. And so I think kind of learning how to get over that hesitation and that fear of, putting yourself out there, that's something that helped me immensely in all different parts of my career and getting out of school and yeah.
I think so too. I guess in the professional world, they call it networking, but even at Georgia State, I was looking to make new friends, and I walked into the language lab and I joined Spanish club, even though I didn't study Spanish, just as a way to meet people. I met my college best friend in Spanish club. And she eventually came to work at a logistics company with me after we both graduated. So just like Jana said, just not being afraid to reach out to people, even a simple hello, walk into a room and or to an event and maybe just say, I'm going to talk to 3 different people. That will really get you a long way. And even in the workplace, I think, whether you walk into a break room, whether it's a meeting, maybe you went to an event with a speaker, just sending them a nice little note, maybe saying what you enjoyed about the event. I definitely think not being afraid to approach people. And I know it's harder for some than others, especially if you are introverted, but you can always send an email if you're a little afraid to, do it in person, or a note on LinkedIn. I definitely appreciate when people reach out to me, and I get excited because it's just, I love connecting with people, especially when it's on common ground. I think that's definitely helped me when I was at Georgia State, just being involved in different activities GSU had to offer. And then even in terms of, I guess, my professional career, just meeting people and saying yes to opportunities, even if it may seem daunting or boring, say yes, because you're never going to know what it's going to bring you or who you're going to meet through just saying yes.
Yeah, and I think what's special about Georgia State is the diversity of the student body. I mean, there's something for everybody at Georgia State. And there's a plethora of resources within the university. I myself, also, spent time in the language lab, the LARC, when I was in grad school. I also was a Spanish tutor, helping students with their beginner level Spanish, which was rewarding because you're not only helping them with their language, but you get to know them also and their aspirations, and you try to figure out ways you can help them and bring them up with you. if you're a student and you're looking for an internship or real work experience, your professors build relationships with your teachers. They know so many people, and that's how I got my internship in Atlanta. I had been accepted into the master's program, and I met with the director of the Institute of International Business, and he was like, you have a whole semester off since they had changed the program. He was like, what do you want to spend your time doing? Do you want to audit MBA courses? I said, no, not really. And he was like, okay, how about work? And I was like, yeah, I need some more work experience. So he sent my resume to CEOs around Atlanta, and I landed a wonderful internship at DS Foods, which is a Hispanic distributor. And I could use my language skills there because of the population and the communities that that company is serving. And then from there, I would volunteer around Atlanta, meet people, and I was in a business organization at Georgia State. And so really putting yourself out there. It's awkward at first once you're new to it, but once you start doing it all the time, it becomes second nature because you realize everyone's in the same boat as you at the end of the day.
Jana, Nive, did you do an internship as well? I know this is one of the questions that was actually asked in the question panel, but this is a great point to maybe address this briefly.
I did not, well, kind of, sort of, while I was at Georgia State, because I was my focus was Spanish education. So I did all of my student teaching and the observational hours and things like that within schools. So sort of. But I did, when I was at Georgia Southern, I did study abroad for a summer in Spain. And then I also did an internship there at the Georgia Southern Museum. So yeah, it's definitely like talking to professors, talking to other people within the university, just being really active in terms of like different student organizations. Those are all great ways to like meet people and connect and find opportunities that are out there.
I will admit my college years for me were, I just want to be in college and have fun. So I did not do an internship, but I did part-time work. I tutored. And then when I lived in France, I was teaching English, but I also on the side was tutoring two people that were just looking to, I guess, expand their English skills. And, it was a good way for me to make a little money on the side. But kind of like Mary said, also just connecting with your professors. And even once you leave high school or college, keep in touch with them, because I think it means a lot to them as well. And they can really help you, whether it's, giving you recommendation letters, just connecting you to people they know. I definitely think keeping in touch with people is important.
So it seems like this whole aspect of relationship building is really important, right? And my experience has also been especially when it comes to networking. I also don't like this term networking necessarily, because it seems so like, wow, I'm only going to do this so I benefit from it. But a lot of this is really just connecting at the human level, right? Just start a conversation without trying to come across as wanting anything, right? Just talk to them as a human being. And a lot of times, especially when you talk to people who are used to folks coming up to them and wanting something, right? To not want anything, to just have a conversation really impresses them a lot of times. But this, of course, requires that you have this empathy, that you have this understanding of the other person, that you're willing to listen, that you can kind of, see how maybe you can connect with that person on that, on that deeper level, rather than just talking shop or, coming across as just wanting a reference or something. So I think these are some skills that definitely we learn when we learn languages and intercultural matters. So I'm sure there's some, or I've actually seen there is some interest in terms of, well, how do you go about the job search after college? And then also a question that we had agreed that we wanted to discuss is like, how do you make a case for why languages and intercultural skills are important, are an asset to you? Because there's a lot of people, especially in the business world, who don't necessarily understand that. They think your skills are much more important. So maybe walk us through this a little bit. So how did you go about finding a job, and how did you make that case for language and intercultural skills? Mary, do you want to get started?
Yeah, so I had that internship, like I mentioned, at Diaz Foods, and they fortunately ended up hiring me. So I was already employed finishing the grad school program at Georgia State. I will say that I gained so much and learned so much at Diaz. It was such a good start to my career. But every career move you take is also this like moment of self-reflection and learning about yourself and what you like and dislike and types of management styles and people you want to work for and company mission and values and culture. So I got to a point where I was, working for this wonderful company founded on the American dream, but I needed to work for a company that actually was going to be more global in nature. And I had been at a community service event at Grady High School, and my mom is a Starbucks store manager, and I had gone to this with her, and we're painting some stairs, and I'm talking to this lady, and she's asking questions about me, and she's like, and I'm asking questions about her, but she doesn't give me her title or anything like that. She's just like, yeah, I'm around the Southeast, blah 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 blah, and I'm like, okay, cool. And it comes to find out, she's the VP of the operations for the Southeast. And so I had added her on LinkedIn. I had always kept in touch with her. And there was a role that had opened up as a sourcing analyst out of one of their manufacturing facilities in Southern California. And so I was able to, reach out to her when I saw the job. And, within 24 hours, I had HR calling me from Starbucks about an interview. That was a unique position within the company. And I was able to apply my intercultural language skills because in Southern California, a lot of your factory labor comes from, Mexico and Central America. So the people who I was going to be needing to work with on the plant floor were going to be speaking Spanish, and some of them spoke English, but some of them did not. So it wasn't necessary because there were other people who could translate for me, but it was value added that I could just communicate with, my main contact on the plant floor about production and everything like that in the Spanish language.
Nive, Jana?
So I actually started my career in logistics because of someone I met at Georgia State. I was part of she had started this organization called Kelly's Childcare Collective, where they went and provided free childcare to low to no income families. And so I just joined it because a friend of mine from history class was in it. And he said, you just get to hang out with kids all day. It's fun. So I went. And after she graduated from Georgia State, she started working for a logistics company, and I had intended to teach French. So I got certified to teach middle school and high school French, but Georgia was cutting a lot of language programs and I needed a paycheck after I graduated from college. And so I reached out to her and I said, hey, is your company hiring? Because I found out she didn't have logistics experience, but they trained you. And so that's kind of how my career started when I worked for a logistics startup. I did go to the career center at Georgia State, but I don't think I frequented it as often because I thought I was going to teach. And I said, I don't think I need guidance. I know I have to take the GACE. But she helped me get that job. And I was supposed to be at Coyote Logistics for 6 months, and it ended up being 7 years because I fell in love with the job. My role at Coyote was of a corporate trainer. And it was, bringing in people with zero knowledge of logistics, much like when you start studying a foreign language, you don't have any sort of background in it and you start with the basics. And so I feel like I was able to implement some of the things I learned when I started learning my French to help people come into logistics and understand operations and understand transportation. And again, I think the big thing for me is just empathy and being able to connect with people. Just also, having grown up in India, my experience, especially in my preteen years, was very different from people here. And I had to adjust and, kind of get used to life here. And so I feel like it's made me more understanding of people. And it really did help me in that training role to, if someone didn't understand something, not to get frustrated with them, but to maybe try different ways to explain it to them. But yeah, I I guess like throughout my career, it's been because of people I've known that have helped me, connect with other people in different places to kind of go through the ladder.
Yeah, I think that's a huge piece of it. And for me, I've had sort of this like multi-path approach to my career. So, when I first graduated from college, I had a degree in public relations, and ended up working in finance for 2 years. Was like, I don't like this. This isn't what I want to do. So I went back to school. I went to Georgia State. I had already always studied Spanish, but, and always been passionate about it, but I didn't like commit to it until then. And I thought, okay, I'm going to go back. I'm going to do my Spanish degree. I must need to be a teacher because that's what you do. And that is like so not true. There's so many things that you can do with it. And I think the perception that you have to major in something to go do that thing is such a misconception. I have people who work for me that are history majors, are English majors, they're language, scholars of, varying levels. And so when I, like, as a hiring manager, when I have an open role, if someone has on their resume that they speak another language or that they've studied another language, like that always piques my interest because I know they know how to talk to people. And that's such a key skill for people in my company as a whole, but also like in the role specific to my team. Like that's such like a foundational element. Like I can teach them anything else about our job or our product they need to do day to day, but like those inherent ability to explain things to people clearly and talk to them kind of in their language, whatever that may be, even not like, in the true sense of the word, but like being able to connect with them and meet them where they're at as a person is so critical for what we do. And people who are not successful on my team are ones that can't get past doing it their way and not doing it the customer's way. And so it's just such a key piece. And then I think in terms of like finding roles and things like that, LinkedIn is such a huge thing. And go down the job search rabbit hole. Like it'll serve up, recommended positions based on when you type in, and like follow that trail because you'll surface positions that you had no idea and maybe like a great fit for you.
All right. So actually what Jen just said really reminds me of, this question that we get a lot is like, what can I possibly do with languages, right? And my answer generally is like anything you want. Because as you just mentioned and explained, the job skills that you need in terms of the technical skills when you take a new job, a lot of this you can learn, but the interpersonal aspects of being able to communicate with people, really talk to them, understand them, listen to them, those are things you can't really learn that easily. And it's one of these things that if you bring that to the table is a huge asset. So I have a question for you. Since we're in kind of extraordinary times, let's just say, with COVID and everything that's happening to the global job market and just global interactions and so forth, do you think that language or intercultural skills are going to be more or less important in the future? This is a tough question, I know.
I think they're 100% more important. People are just more and more connected every single day. Like for me personally, we have offices all over the world. So I have coworkers in Europe, in Australia, in Latin America, and there's probably not a day that goes by that I don't have a chat from someone or an email from someone asking for my help with a customer they have in their region. And understanding like what the expectations are in those different places and how to communicate to those customers is just so key, because it's not all the same and you can't approach them all the same way.
Yeah, I definitely agree that they're probably going to be just as important or more important before, since, you know, we're in a world where we can't really move about and travel like the way that we used to. And we're going to have to do Zoom calls and video chats and all of that. And, you know, it's much easier to build a connection when you're face to face in person, across from a table from somebody, or, you know, on a bus or whatever it may be. And I think now people are, you know, more than ever going to need to be reliant on this virtual world until we figure out how to more safely move forward. And so, you know, since we can't go see people, I think finding ways to be personable and empathetic and have that come across the screen is going to be, you know, more important. And something I do want to add, just as we keep talking about being interpersonal, I think something for everyone to think about is we're all more similar and alike than we are different. And always keep that in mind. You know, someone is someone's son or daughter or mother, father, cousin, aunt, friend, you know, partner. And so look for those similarities when you're asking questions, because again, you're going to be able to connect with someone trying to find those similarities in your lives, even if you're halfway across the world or across the country, whatever that may be.
Yeah, I also think it is going to be more important to have some of these skills, especially with the pandemic. A lot of companies are moving just to remote work, but that opens up, you know, your opportunity of applying to jobs maybe at companies based in other countries, but they may be okay to hire you remote sitting in Atlanta. So having those language skills, having those intercultural skills will definitely be useful moving forward.
Excellent. That, I know this was somewhat of a rhetorical question because I couldn't agree more from my own personal experience. And one thing that came to mind while you were speaking is, personally, I have never actually gotten a job that I just found somewhere and applied for and interviewed for. All the jobs I've ever gotten were all with people that I met sometimes years before, and we'd stayed connected, and at some point the phone rings and say, you know what, there is this position and we really think you'd be great for it, because you just have the right, you know, personality for it. You have a way of dealing with people, leadership, all these things, right? And but that means that these people have to know you. You have to be able to maybe show who you really are truthfully, right? So it's always a tricky thing to, if you decide to put on this facade. I've always personally been, you know, benefited from just being very much myself without, of course, you don't want to be offensive or anything. That makes perfect sense. Well, very good. Well, we have a few questions here from our attendees, and maybe we could look at a few of them. Since all three of you are GSU alumni, there's one question from Ebi Pawega, and he asked, or she, I'm sorry if I can't place this right now. Have you found that GSU has name recognition in non-local settings with non-local companies?
I would definitely say yes. Like, I mean, the majority of like my roles have always been in the Atlanta area. I'm an Atlanta native, but even when I talk to my coworkers that are based in other areas, I'm like, oh, I went to Georgia State. They're like, yep, okay, cool. That's the one downtown, right? Yes, it is. Like, so I think I would definitely say yes.
Georgia's, so I spend a lot of time on the West Coast, and I currently live in Texas right now. You know, the city of Atlanta is definitely on people's radar. And when you are able to say that you went to a school in the city, I think that in itself speaks, because it's such a global environment and diverse environment that Atlanta offers versus some other large cities. I definitely think that's pretty special about Georgia State. Even when I worked out of the facility with Starbucks in Southern California, there was actually someone in quality assurance who had gone to Georgia State. And you're able to kind of educate your employees on what a great school it is. And then even at Starbucks, I had become friends with someone in the break room that I saw often, and she had her accounting degree from Georgia State, and then she connected me to all the people at Georgia State that she knew within Starbucks. And we were able to kind of, bridge that. And I think there is something to say, about the school and where it's located that is definitely offers an advantage.
Yeah, when I've talked about state, it's always been talking about, the urban setting and how cool it is to go to lunch. And you see people in their business clothes also grabbing lunch with you. And what I always talked about was graduating at the Dome. My uncle actually flew all the way from Austin because he wanted to go to the Dome, not for a football game, but when we were graduating. So I feel like it does have, people do recognize it. And then being at UPS, I've met a ton of people that also went to Georgia State, and it's just nice to see your Panther family around.
I mean, we're a huge university. I mean, we have 56,000 students, I think, approximately. So you can imagine how many students graduate each year. And when you do a search, you mentioned LinkedIn earlier, you can do a search by school on LinkedIn, for example, and see who's around and who's connected to whom, and who's gone to Georgia State. It's amazing actually where people are. And yes, I mean, we're not Tech, we're not Emory, we're not UGA, but I think, as you mentioned, with the diversity, with the special place that Georgia State has in the fabric of, our society here in the state and beyond, I think we definitely have a specific role to play. And I think we can rightfully be very proud of that.
Yeah,
So
and that's also like a connection you can leverage with people. Like I've had people message me that I do not know at all on LinkedIn and be like, hey, I see you're a fellow Panther. I saw this position at your company. Could you point me in the right direction, or is there someone I can reach out to? And sometimes it's kind of nice because a lot of employers offer, like my company does this, they offer employee referral bonuses. So like if I refer someone and they get hired and they stay a worker, I get a check. And so like even just stuff like that, you can leverage that connection with people because they're oftentimes very willing to help you even though they don't know you.
Mm-hmm. So there's another question that we have from Airam Gutierrez Hammond. The question basically addresses ways for language learners to continue studying their language and getting better and getting more exposure to the language and the culture during pandemic times. Because I mean, one of the big issues is, of course, we don't have as much interaction, and probably for the right reasons right now, with our teachers, with other people, with other learners. So what advice would you have for high school students in particular to say, how can they continue on and really broaden their skills in the language and understanding of a culture?
I mean, something I use even now, Netflix. There's tons of, cinema, TV shows that you can watch just to get your ears used to it. Sometimes what I used to do is I used to watch a French movie, but also do French subtitles so I could also read it, while they're talking. That's been useful. Another thing that I used was meetup.com to just, they have all kinds of groups where, like whether it's, conversational French group or conversational Spanish group for different levels. So maybe joining one of those, and I'm pretty sure they're doing online or virtual meetings now just to connect.
Yeah, I would definitely, listen to things, you can change the language on Netflix and things like that and, read the subtitles. I think if you're wanting to actually practice the language, I would look in your community. When we had to shelter in place here in Fort Worth ISD put together this bi-weekly Spanish Zoom call for people who wanted to practice Spanish, could just hop on the call, which I thought was pretty awesome. That was pretty unique. Talk to your friends and see if they know someone who's willing to also practice with you for 30 minutes, an hour at a time. I have a friend in Seattle. He actually really wants to improve his English. So we would once a week get on the phone for an hour and I'd speak to him in Spanish and he'd speak to me in English, and we'd correct each other and help each other out with our language skills. So those are some ideas that I would have about trying to actually practice the language.
Yeah, I would second all of that.
So we've gotten a couple of questions actually, and I think in the other panels as well, and that is the question of of how language and intercultural skills really help with jobs, not so much in the for-profit sector, but there's another huge employer or employment possibility that a lot of people don't even think of, and that is in the government. Do you know people who work in the government or what they have been able to accomplish in there? Have you considered a career in the government? I mean, there's so many different agencies. And do you think this is a viable option, or is it something you would recommend? What's your experience with this?
I mean, for me personally, I've never worked in the government outside of like being a teacher, which is technically a government position. But I do have some friends that, you know, have explored those different possibilities, from the FBI to also there's so many different government organizations. And even when I was leaving teaching, I looked into that myself. So there's quite a few positions with the Immigration and Naturalization Service. There's, you know, so many different areas that could fall into. And I think it's definitely worth investigating, and, you know, can be a great opportunity for people.
Yeah, so my dad is a retired German professor. My sister was a Spanish professor until a month ago. And then I studied French. So my dad would always joke that we could go seek European asylum together as a family. And there was a time when I studied history and was sort of into, you know, current issues and that kind of thing, where I thought, oh, that would be kind of cool, you know, working for the FBI, or maybe trying to do some sort of like diplomatic work with the UN, that kind of thing. So I don't personally know anyone, but I think, I mean, from what I see on LinkedIn, they're always looking for people that can speak languages because they need to send people places. I know my dad does a lot of translation work. So, you know, it may not be your full-time career, but it's also something you can do on the side, I guess, you know, whether it's translating documents, that kind of thing.
And real quick, Mary, I'm not going to forget about you, but I've done some translation work as well, and interpretation. I've done some live interpretations for CNN and some other news media outlets. And I tell you what, that is a tremendous skill, and highly sought after, and also very lucrative, but it's also extremely draining. But a lot of these things, that requires not just, of course, the language skills, but you really have to understand that culture and what they're actually saying, and know how to transfer that into the target language. So it's a huge challenge. It's a lot of fun. It's extremely exhausting and very nerve-wracking, I could tell you that. But you're right. I mean, sometimes even just helping somebody understand something. I've had friends come to me. It's like, hey, there's this song that I love, but it's in French. I don't understand this very well. What does that mean, right? And so that is a conversation starter. So sorry to kind of chime in. Mary, go ahead.
Yeah, I also, I think translation is an art too, and interpretation. I think we forget that. I don't have a ton to add, but I did meet, I have a friend here, and he speaks like 3 different languages out of the Middle East, and he had explored a career in government as well in national security. I do know that it can be a rigorous process to get through it, but I know that he was interested because of how rewarding that career was going to be. And if I'm not mistaken, for myself, I think there were some government jobs that had been popping up on Georgia State's career website. I was an advocate or avid user of the career site at Georgia State, and you do have kind of the public sector posting jobs within government, and as well for NGOs as well.
Mary, I'm glad you actually mentioned national security, because that's one thing that keeps popping up. And over the last couple of years, we've had representatives from the CIA actually visiting our department, and we had a couple of events. And a lot of what they talked about is how important it is to have people, number one, who really want to do something for the country, right? Who want to, follow Kennedy's famous saying, ask not what the country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. And so in that respect, a lot of them have been looking for people who have those language and cultural skills as analysts, as people who really can understand and explain and translate what is going on abroad, who have a deep understanding. And so national security, I think, is definitely, especially during this cyber age now, with so many threats coming our way, it's definitely a valuable and a viable alternative to work at. So I'm glad you mentioned that, Mary. Thank you. So we have a couple more minutes. So let's see. We've talked about national security, so I think that's very important. Since all of you have been abroad, right? What has been your impression how you were received abroad as Americans? Because I mean, I just came back from Germany and I got the same questions everywhere. I'm not going to say which ones, but I guess you could probably imagine. How do you think you were perceived, and any kind of maybe negative assumptions that you might have encountered? How were you able to counter them?
I know for me, like, it's been different over the years as I've gone to different places at different points in time. Probably the longest time I was abroad was when I studied in Spain, and I had an interesting experience there because no one ever thought I was American. Everyone assumed I was either French or German. I don't know, I guess I just looked German or something, but so a lot of times people didn't think that I was American, so I didn't really have to like encounter that. But it was also during the George W. Bush administration, relatively shortly after 9/11. So, things were very politicized, and there was a lot going on in the world at that time. And so I think the general perception of Americans did have like a negative connotation in Europe, but I didn't have to like combat that myself personally. But I think over the years, as I've gone to other countries, there is like a stereotype of Americans sometimes. And so when you do use your language skills to like show someone that you're making an effort to speak to them in their language, or you're understanding something that is specific to their culture that is very different than how it is here, it goes such a long way in them, shedding that stereotype or realizing that their interaction with you is going to be positive.
There's, real quick, which reminds me of the old saying, when you speak to somebody in the language they understand, it goes to their head. Mm-hmm. If you speak to somebody in their language, it goes to their heart. Yeah. So that's a huge difference. Yeah.
I would say the entire world always knows what's going on in America. And I think we're less, about what's going on in the rest of the world, unless it's in the mainstream American news. So, I definitely would try to find non-mainstream American news sources. I think BBC is great. I think Al Jazeera is great, because when you open up, I use apps on my phone to get the news, and their homepages, they have American news, but they have news from all over the world, and it's right there in your face, and it's always good to read that. I think, when I've traveled, there's kind of perceptions about Americans, but everyone's usually very open. And again, just asking questions about, who I am, my life, all of that. They genuinely are, very curious to how, we live our lives, our day-to-day, all of that. And I think, asking them as well about their lives is just as important. And I've been in countries where I can speak the language, and I've been in countries where I definitely can't speak the language. And one of my most interesting travel moments is I was backpacking in Morocco by myself, and I had met this girl on a train who was also by herself, and we ended up traveling together, and we went to go eat at this place, and the guy didn't speak English and he spoke Spanish. So she was like, "Oh my gosh, you're the first American I've ever met that speaks a second language." And I was like, oh no, is what I thought, right then and there. I was like, that's, unfortunate. But, I was like, no, we're working on, our language skills, because she was German and could speak, 3 or 4 languages, and had never, I guess, come across an American who could. But it was nice to break that stereotype that day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so when I lived in France, I didn't fully consider myself American because of that hybrid Indian American thing. And so I think a lot of them were confused because they're like, wait, you're Indian, but you live in the US, but you're learning French. But I think there was never, I don't think I had very many negative experiences. I was always just impressed with my students. They were in high school. I was just impressed with their knowledge of not just the US, but of the world in general. And then when I said I lived in Atlanta, they started asking about hip hop and, 2 Chainz. And I was just very impressed because I remember being in high school and my levels of French weren't at their level of English, nor was my, I guess, cultural competence. And I think in this day and age with like access to so many things on your phone, they just seem to know a lot, which I guess helps because then it's just easier for you to connect with them. But I also was in bigger cities and, I think the experiences you have compared to like smaller towns or smaller places is different. But I was lucky to not have very many negative experiences. I do think the US and has a lot of catching up to do to the rest of the world in terms of being tolerant and being open and, seeing things from a different perspective.
So we only have just a couple of minutes. Just very briefly, is there like a particular intercultural encounter moment that just sticks out when you think back to your travels? Something where you said, wow, that was just amazing. And I'm glad I had this experience, but without being open, this wouldn't have happened. It's tough, right?
It's so hard.
But you travel a lot. There are a lot of these little things. Meaning
hard to like. Well, this isn't necessarily me personally, but I have a very good friend who speaks Italian, and he is. I was the recipient of his openness. So he talks to everyone. Is just one of those people, and because of him doing that, we ended up in a vineyard having a wine tasting overlooking the Mediterranean on like the most beautiful day in the world. So like if he wasn't meeting people and talking to the right people, that never would have happened. So
Nive?
Yeah, for me, so I had that same Morocco trip, I had decided to pop up to Spain to go be a spectator for Running of the Bulls, and I was by myself. And so I get off the train there and, I'm by myself. I have a backpack. I didn't bring a suitcase. And there's another girl who's by herself with a backpack, and she was from Australia. So we just ended up kicking it in Pamplona at Running of the Bulls together. And then she was like, oh yeah, when I was at the actual like train station back in Barcelona, I met another girl. She was from Kentucky. So like the three of us just like found each other, just being like, hey, what's up? Are you also alone? Like, like trying to find like community within this, festival in Spain. And it was kind of just like this beautiful moment of we're all here by ourselves, but we're also like all here together at the same time. That sounds really cheesy, but it's also the truth.
Very good. Nive, in 20 seconds.
I think when I lived in Germany when I was 5, and so we went back many years later to visit the house we lived in, and met the homeowner, and he invited us in for coffee, and it was just kind of cool to see, I guess, a childhood house again, but I was much older.
Excellent. I know we all have probably once we start thinking about it, there's so many just meaningful and wonderful experiences, but this has been a great experience for me. I hope for our attendees as well. Thank you so much, Jana, Mary, Nive, for making the time to be with us here today. So unfortunately, our time's up. So this kind of concludes our alumni panel, but we really appreciate your sharing your experiences and your wisdom with us. So just as a reminder to everybody, there will be a recording of this and all panel discussions that took place or are taking place this week that will be made available on the CULTR website after the event. So just keep checking. Those are being uploaded and added constantly. And also just, keep the conversation going. Share your experiences in the post-event survey on the websites. We definitely love to hear from you. And we have one more day tomorrow. So join us for the final World Languages Week discussion tomorrow. There are actually 2 events. The first one is a humanitarian and public health panel tomorrow at noon, which is a really exciting thing. And then for those of you who speak French or learning French, there is actually a Peace Corps panel in French from 2 to 3 tomorrow afternoon. So we hope to see you again. Thank you very much for attending. And on behalf of CULTR, thank you so much for joining us. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.